surviving till dawn.
Again.
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with a review of Ready or Not 2, Here I Come, a sequel that I feel like I personally willed into being. And I know that's not true, and I know I'm not the only fan of Ready or Not. And I know the good people at Searchlight Pictures had to actually greenlight this sucker for it to happen. But yeah, when I saw Ready or Not in 2019, it was just an instant new favorite. You know, one of those times you see a movie and you feel like, oh wow, this is just so on my wavelength. It is absolutely one of my favorite movies of the past 10 years. And I would just say it's one of my favorite movies. In fact, I'm such a big fan that I have the poster to the first movie a few feet away from me here in my office, right over there on the wall. But a sequel just didn't seem likely. It was a small movie that made a nice amount of money for the size film it was, but it just didn't seem like a sequel was in the cards. But here it is, and I think the sequel is a blast. I had so much fun with it. The really cool thing here is that pretty much everyone who could return to work on this movie reasonably did return. That starts with the directors, the duo known as Radio Silence, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette, the writers, Guy Busick and R. Christopher Murphy, and of course, as our leading lady, Samara Weaving has Grace, an essential element given how awesome she was in that first movie, what a sort of star-making role it was for her. And it is such a pleasure to see her back in that bloody wedding dress again, 7 years later, in a sequel that picks up the second the last movie ended. One of those few times that happens. It's always fun when they can do that, when they pick up a story right away. This time, 7 years. I feel like this might be a new record for how long it took in real life to make a sequel that picks up the second the last one ended. But Samara Weaving can definitely pull off looking like she is still the same age she was 7 years before, as we pick up with Grace that same morning after the events of the first movie, and her quickly finding out that her game is not over, that what happened with the family she married into really just opened the doors to a much larger series of events because of other families who've made similar deals with the devil, like the ones that she just escaped from, and how now she is going to be trapped again and forced to play hide and seek one more time. As excited as I was for the possibility of a Ready or Not sequel, and then the official announcement that it was happening, there was a small amount of trepidation too, because you watch that first movie and it feels like a pretty closed story. There is not a supernatural end for where a sequel will go, especially one with Grace again, because how could she possibly get mixed up with events like that again? And I think that they took the only route they could, which is to say the route of, hey, this isn't over yet, that you've pissed off people because of what you did in this movie. This is a sequel that is not breaking the mold. This is not a sequel that's, shaking things up story-wise. It is definitely one of those sequels that gives you more of what you loved and goes bigger and builds out stylistically from what we saw the first time, but is following the same basic path. I think that that can make for a very satisfying sequel, which is what I think they've done here. I will get out of the way. I don't think this movie is better than the first one. I think the first is the superior movie because it's doing it first, and I think it's a little tighter in its construction and has a horror comedy, which both these movies are, and I think do a very good job of. The first one maybe delivers a little bit more on the horror side as far as a little more intensity in the first movie. This one I think gets even a little more broader in its comedy, but I understand why, because they're going to expand on what's happening here. And the idea of these people, these rich a-holes who've made deals with the devil, and once we're getting to see even more of them and how they act, it lends itself to a very dark, twisted comedy, and I think that's where they go with it. So, yeah, I think the first one does still stand on its own, but as far as a return to this world, bringing back Grace as a character and still making you understand why she worked so well the first time, absolutely, this is still delivering. And a key component here, of course, is giving her this partner, this time in the form of her sister, Faith, played by Kathryn Newton, who, yes, they have to account for the fact that it didn't sound like she had a sister in the first movie. So, of course, they make that a crucial plot point. Why was it? It sounded like she had no sister in the first movie, and she wasn't talking about this girl. Kathryn Newton had already worked with Radio Silence before on Abigail. She is so great in everything she's in. She has such a wonderful, specific energy, I think, that she brings to all her projects, many of which have been horror movies or horror comedy movies. And so she's perfect in the Ready or Not world. And her and Samara Weaving has these sisters feels right. They look like they could be sisters. They really pair well together. They have great energy together. And just seeing the two of them, what they go through, and this is a radio silence movie, it's a Ready or Not movie too. So, of course, they are going to be covered in blood. They are going to be in insane situations of violence and gore and viscera are going to be occurring all around them, sometimes caused by them. And we know that they're both up for that challenge. They have both proven it time and again in their films, but there's something really cool about putting them together. It just feels like, of course, Samara Weaving and Kathryn Newton as sisters. And I think Radio Silence, who've worked with them both before, know how to use them really well. And I think it's such a satisfying pairing. And I think they're both excellent. This movie brings in representatives from several different families that have made this deal. But our two main antagonists, the two that we kind of go into the movie with, are Sarah Michelle Gellar and Sean Hattasey has twins, Ursula and Titus. Amazing names, by the way. I mean, David Cronenberg plays their dad, which is fantastic in and of itself. And yeah, I believe that a character played by David Cronenberg, who's made a deal with the devil, would absolutely name his kids Titus and Ursula. They are really fun together. I feel like Radio Silence really have this affinity for sibling dynamics. There was some of it in the first Ready or Not with the family in that movie. And of course, Scream 5 and 6 focus so much on the Carpenter sisters. And here, it's a real central element because we've got both Grace and Faith, and we've got Ursula and Titus as these battling sibling duos, and we see the drama going on between both of them, the tensions between both these duos, who are literally trying to kill each other at the same time. Yeah, I really enjoyed that back and forth that we see with all four of those characters and how it plays out throughout the movie. I think in general, Radio Silence are really good with casting, and everyone here seems to know exactly what the assignment is. And actors like Nestor Carbonell and Olivia Chang are all great, has these different people that, again, they're the ultimate rich a-holes. They have literally sold their souls for money and power, and that the way they see the world is so very specific, and a lot of great comedy is mined from that. I think maybe another standout though is Elijah Wood, who plays someone who is not one of the family members, but he does have a vested interest in what's going on. He is sort of controlling the game, and I really like Elijah Wood in this movie, and kind of the controlled, reined in way that he is giving this performance and sort of watching, and you feel like judging the whole time what's going on. There's a lot of really entertaining set pieces in this movie, confrontations. There's going to be blood explosions because Radio Silence love their blood explosions, and I sure love watching those blood explosions. There is one sequence in particular, though, that I think is the standout. It is a fight scene that Samara Weaving has as Grace with someone who's trying to kill her, of course. They have a fight inside a ballroom, and the circumstances of this fight and what's happened to both her and this other character, and they're both at a disadvantage, and it is very funny. And again, that mixture of comedy and horror. When it doesn't work at all. But when you can get it right, and I think Radio Silence are so good at it, it can deliver so big. And I thought that was one of the funniest scenes I've seen in a movie in quite some time. Is this scene in Ready or Not 2 of these two women trying to kill each other, but having some issues with what's going on. A really wonderful sequence. I think the ending of this movie has a hard time living up to the ending of the first one. The ending of the first movie is such a satisfying ending, and how it all plays out, and how it all plays out with Grace and Samara Weaving's expressions as it's all happening. I did think it was a very high bar to match, and I don't think this movie quite gets there. It's going big with what's happening, and going pretty wild, and I did appreciate the swing they were taking, but I don't think it lands quite as much as that first movie's ending, which is just such a high. But overall, yeah, I really had fun with Ready or Not 2. Look, trilogies are very enticing, so I can't say I don't want a third one because come on, it'd be cool to get a third one. But I think that they've made a two movie story here that also works well in its own way. And I don't know, maybe in 7 years they can do another one. That would be fun. Although it'd also be cool if they got one quicker. But yeah, I still can't quite believe this movie exists, but I'm very happy it does. It's a sequel that just had a smile on my face most of the time watching it because it was such a pleasure to be back in this realm. And I love that even as Radio Silence and Samara Weaving have had their careers get bigger and bigger, that they were able to reunite for Ready or Not here. So those are my thoughts on Ready or Not 2. Here I Come, which is in theaters everywhere this weekend. If you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.